to procedural items. First of all, are there any declarations of interest? Move on to item 2, confirmation of minutes for the meeting that was held on the 11th of February. Could I have somebody who proposes those? Councillor Evans, Councillor Gardner, thank you. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. And now we move to decision items. We have 2 items to determine this morning, and there is a usual protocol that we apply in terms of how we deal with the order of items. If there are speakers, then we try to do an item that involves attendance of speakers and their involvement. So we're going to go with item 2 first, and then item 1. Of course, I'm sorry, yes, substitute members.
Sorry.
That was on my list.
Did press it. Sorry, Chairman, to interrupt. Councillor Collins is here on behalf of Councillor Farrington, who sends his apologies, and Councillor Ledger has also sent his apologies, but doesn't have a substitute.
Thank you very much, thank you. So we move on to decision items. As I say, we're going to deal with item 2 first, which is Tunstead's Farm, and the officer involved is Andrew Stell. So he will do a very short presentation, then we'll break for speakers, and then he'll resume and complete the presentation, and then we'll go to questions and the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for just doing a bit of faff in there. Your microphone's still on, Chairman. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name's Andrew Stell. I'll be presenting this item for you today. The application relates to a site called Tunstead's Farm, which is on Greenhalgh Lane in Greenhalgh. So it's generally within the circle on the plan there. So we've got the M55 junction 3, Fleetwood Road going north and south. So we're in that general rural area of the borough. Looking at it a little bit more closely, Tunstead's Farm is this site here. Greenhalgh Lane comes from the Starbucks and the petrol station that I presume most people are familiar with on Fleetwood Road. Greenhalgh Lane comes off there, bends round, comes past the property here called Showerland Farm, and then heads off in this direction where there are a series of other farms and residential properties heading off towards Greenhalgh and Wheaton in that direction. The specific application site relates to an area of land at the back corner of the farm here, which I'll show you in a little bit more detail later. So the site's a farm. It's in the countryside, Greenhalgh Lane, designated as countryside in the local plan. The application in front of us is for change of use of that part of the site to allow the use for storage of HGVs and trailer vehicles associated with a civil engineering business that is operated by the owners of the property. And there have been some physical works, some hard standing works and a concrete barrier to contain the areas where the vehicles are stored. The application's at committee today because there have been objections from the parish council. They've raised issues about highway safety and the amenity impacts. The other point to raise is that the officer report was written in advance of receiving the formal comments from the Highway Authority. Those have now been received and are included in full in the late observations paper. They don't raise any objections to the application, but I'll cover those in the main presentation when I get to that point. And the officer recommendation is to grant planning permission for this. So just to look at the site in a little more detail, if we look at the sort of right-hand picture first, this is Greenhalgh Lane, as it call it, bends round. The access point to the site is on the outside of the bend here. There's a stoned track that comes round this paddock area and then enters into sort of the main farmyard. These grey buildings here are farm buildings. This is a building that is being converted to a storage use. Planning committee granted planning permission for that a couple of 18 months or so ago. And the area in question where this vehicle storage is proposed is this area to the rear of the farmyard here. Plan on the left is a more detail of the access point, and this is being designed to indicate that the visibility displays that have been discussed by the Highway Authority are available for, and there's a turning, you can turn the largest trailer vehicle on the road without it overrunning running the verge, is what that plan's designed to demonstrate. So that's what we're looking at. Excuse me. So at that point, I have to put a break for the speakers, Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew, and I'm now going to hand over to the Vice Chair.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The protocol for speakers is that each speaker will have 3 minutes to come forward or speak from the rear as appropriate to make their case. I would clarify for those who've not been before, we don't do this as a question and answer session, but it's designed to be fair to everybody and obviously in line with planning protocols and legislation. So without further ado, could I call the first speaker, who is Mr. Walter Holloway of Charolins Farm. Mr. Holloway.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity of being able to speak. My name is W. Holloway. I occupy Sherolin Farm, which we have developed in a traditional and sympathetic manner since 1990. We breed pedigree cattle and raise bought-in stock. We also have a national award-winning touring site and recently built a holiday cottage. Our closest neighbour at Tunstead's Farm did rear young stock and bred sheep. Tunstead's was recently sold to a family with young children accompanied by the grandparents. Approximately 18 months ago, we attended a planning meeting here with respect to Tunstead's request to diversify into B8 storage. This was in order to financially make their farming enterprise more sustainable. We had no objection to this in principle, but their best livestock building was put forward. I did express serious concerns as to the amount of activity already existing with this heavy plant and machinery coming in and out on site. Mr. Radcliffe, the chairman, instructed me to be vigilant in order to inform enforcement as conditions were attached to prevent this on its approval. From that day to this, more than 1,000 tonnes of hardcore have been transported on site, many plant and machinery, many trailers stored and transported, ground levels raised as high as 2 foot, concrete walls, footings, aprons, no proper drainage appears apparent, all reported to enforcement. Mr. Lawless, the enforcement officer, was requested to view this from Sherolin Farm's perspective and from their side. He declined. My livestock has suffered from this abrupt, loud noises, and I have a veterinary letter with me to confirm the detriment that this has created. Our touring site is affected by the noise of the passing wagons, plant and machinery transport far greater than the size of the wagons portrayed. Our new holiday let, according to Holiday Cottages UK, may not be viable. For example, Thursday and Friday last, I can confirm more than 20 wagon movements took place to bring hardcore onto Tunstead's Farm. Monday last, I observed 2 wagons being loaded with stored stone to be delivered. All this noise and activity will create a demise to Sherland Farm, the last remaining livestock farm on Greenhalgh Lane. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Holloway. And the next speaker, thank you very much. The next speaker we have is Jane Lingings, who I believe will be speaking from the Catherine. And in your own time, Jane, and again, 3 minutes, and I'll give you a call if you get close to that.
Thank you. My name is Jane and I am a partner in the adjacent tourism businesses. This application is being presented as simple rural diversification, but what you see on the ground, and quite literally from our side of the fence, is something very different. This is a major retrospective application for an industrial plant and machinery business. I served for many years as a parish clerk in Fylde, so I understand how planning policies are intended to work, and that's exactly why I'm so concerned. The officer's report stretches countryside and diversification policies far beyond their intended purpose to justify approval. Conversely, these protection policies were applied previously to impose conditions at this site in the application for storage units, conditions that specifically prohibited any plant or machinery being stored in the external areas of the site. I don't want to repeat all the objections, you have these in your papers, but what I'd like to address is fairness, because this matters to every person on the committee. When your community sees a large unauthorised development appearing without permission, operating openly for months with no meaningful enforcement, and then later see a recommendation for approval, it naturally raises questions. When enforcement doesn't happen, it's not just a technical issue. It affects people's daily lives and businesses. Your own peer review acknowledged that enforcement must improve, so why are we still seeing the same pattern? If this application had come through the correct channels without any works commencing, it would have been refused. Given the complete disregard shown for planning rules so far, there is every reason to believe this enterprise will continue to expand, and if their actions are effectively condoned today by approving, what happens then? What is left to stop further expansion, stone crushing, intensification and erosion of the countryside? And what credibility will your policies have then if they can be ignored without consequence? The officer's recommendation is advice only. Policies previously relied on for protections of rural areas are now being stretched to justify approval. The decision rests with yourselves. You became councillors to represent your community, uphold fairness and to ensure that policies apply equally to everyone. Moments like today are exactly why your role matters. You have an opportunity to restore trust and show that in Fylde, the rules and policy matter. Please look very carefully at what is truly in front of you today and refuse this application, rather than setting a precedent that others will expect to follow. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that, Jane. And the next speaker we have is Councillor Richard Nulty of Greenhalgh and Thistleton Parish Council. Richard. Good morning. I think you know how it works. I'll give you a to get close to your 3 minutes. In your own time, sir.
This application relates only to the storage of 3 big trucks and 2 trailers which are authorised by the HGV operator's licence and are used for the transportation of aggregates from quarries to sites across the region and similar loads. The applicant suggests that once mobile at 6 in the morning, they would work away and return at 5 in the evening. Residents have other views. The application ignores the use of the farmyard and building, which are the base for several excavators, rollers, mini digger, fast towing tractor and smaller plant van pickups and trailers used in connection with groundwork activities rather than farming. Aggregates are sometimes kept on site. We believe that the new business at Tunsteads is degrading the quality of the countryside and is threatening the rural diversification to leisure, especially the 4 small caravan sites and 2 fishing lakes located in the vicinity. Its operation has an acute environmental and economic impact on the immediate neighbour. We disagree with the officer interpretation of the countryside policy. The preamble to GD4 states it's important that the countryside is protected from unacceptable development which would harm its character. The intrinsic value and rural character needs to be protected. GD4A, the policy, accepts the principle of development of agriculture, horticulture, small-scale tourism, other activities appropriate to a rural area, plus the development needed for the purpose of meeting local business and community needs. That must be sensitive to the surroundings and have an acceptable impact on roads. This application meets no community need. Neither does it meet any particular local business need in relation to Rural Fylde. The company serves business needs of the wider region. It's registered as MJS Groundworks Northwest, and the website testimonials come from as far as Barrow. The argument that local business needs should not merely apply to the immediate rural area but should embrace the sub-regional dimension opens up the prospect of wholesale intrusive developments being established across the numerous rural land holdings near the M55 junction. We believe that if this application is approved, the bar will be set far too low and our countryside will not be protected. This family business employs few staff, but it only offers the neighbourhood noise, pollution, heavy traffic activity. We don't know how the vehicles and plants are serviced, washed, fueled, and whether the necessary drainage and interceptor arrangements are in place. So finally, the Parish Council asks that you consider the whole picture and the wider impacts of a decision here. If you don't know or understand the matter fully, we ask that you defer for a site meeting and perhaps call for further and better particulars before coming to a conclusion. And retrospection should give no special status in this case. It's an ordinary case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, I would call Councillor Paul Hayhurst, who is speaking as the ward councillor and is not bound by the 3 minutes. I would say that giving you unlimited time should not be taken as a challenge in any way, Councillor.
I won't keep you for all day.
Over to you.
Members and well, Chairman and members, you'll know that I very rarely come to speak at a planning meeting. It's 13 miles away from me, and the last thing I want to do is come here every time. So it's a long time since I've been to a planning meeting. But the fact is, the times when I do is when I feel it's something that's absolutely vital for my area. And this is one of them, I'm afraid. Greenhouse is right next to the M55. And the fact is that letting this go through today is opening the door to further applications. You probably remember one company which has been all over the file trying to get HGV a HGV park. I know they've been in Ellswick, they've been in Wheaton, they've been in Westby, and the fact is that they've been there without planning permission in the past. What this is doing is legitimising what this company has been doing in the past. I feel that this is not diversification, this is urbanisation. And it is, as you know, a retrospective application. It is a case of they have put 1,000 tonnes of hardcore on farmland. They have raised the level of the land by 2 foot. And we are in a situation now being expected to approve something with conditions. What chance is there of them keeping to those conditions when they've not kept to normal planning conditions by applying for a planning application? I was the county councillor for Greenhouse for 12 years, and I know the problems in Greenhouse Lane. It was one of the constant things that people kept coming up to me about the problems of vehicles in Greenhouse Lane. And I'm asking you not to increase the problems on that lane. I think also the fact is that what is diversification? The countryside. In my view, diversification is for the caravan site, for bed and breakfast, for cafes, that sort of things which are not going to take away from the green area that we have. But the fact is, by allowing these people to operate at 6 a.m. in the morning, I'm afraid that the fact is, who's going to stay in a caravan by this site? Would you go on holiday in a caravan when you know that there's people that's next door with HGVs and at 6 a.m. in the morning? You wouldn't, would you? And now what's going to happen here, I'm sure, is that the people who have got the caravan site will go out of business being next door to this. So I'm asking you basically to turn this down and keep file rule. And I'm asking you to do that on the basis that this will open the door to further applications. Just look where Greenhouse is. It's right next to the motorway. And we're going to encourage other such things as this in that area. So I'm asking you basically to keep file rule. I think the other thing I should mention is the 3-metre high concrete block. Again, I've had cases in my own area in the borough where people have put a fence up which is 3 inches too high and they've been told to take it down, and that's been like 2 metres, just a bit more than 2 metres. And yet here we're talking about a concrete block which is going to be 3 metres high in open countryside. This is wrong. It is wrong. And I came here today and I switched on Radio Lancashire, and it was saying about people complaining in Fleetwood, particularly a school at Fleet, about the smell from the Lancashire County Council, or was Lancashire County Council household waste tip, which is right next to 2 caravan sites. And it was obvious. And I know from speaking to the officers at County in the past that they wish this had never happened because of all the complaints and the problems it was creating for the caravan sites. And the fact is that people are complaining there. Now, there's no smell with this, but there's noise, and it's going to be at 6 o'clock in the morning. Surely, you wouldn't want this next door to you, and you certainly wouldn't want it if you were going on holiday. So, again, all I can say to you is please turn this down. And, all right, if they go for appeal, let's test it. Let's test to see what diversification means. It seems as though the way we're looking at it, there's no limit to diversification about what they can put there. But obviously, there must be. We've got to keep Greenhouse green. And finally, if you don't feel as though you can turn this down, please go and have a look at what is there. I'm sure, I don't know how many of you have actually been out to have a look at Greenhouse. I hope you have. But if you go and have a look at this site, I'm sure you will not be coming back here to pass this. So please, if nothing else, go and have a site visit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hayhurst. And the last speaker I have on the list, Maggie Sutcliffe and Rob Mackenzie. Is it Maggie? Is it you that's? Morning, Maggie. As with other speakers, 3 minutes in your own time. I'll give you a nudge if you get close. You press the right-hand button when you.
Chair, members of the committee. Firstly, please forgive any nerves. I am neurodivergent, so I find public speaking challenging. I'm here today to provide a background of who we are, what we are trying to achieve and why. Myself and my husband have been at Tunstead since 23. It was important to the previous owner of over 40 years that Tunstead Farm was taken on by someone who would give it the attention it needed. Having known us for years and aware of Michael's background in farming, he was keen for us to become the new owners. We are not developers with an open chequebook. We are a hard-working family with the following 3 objectives. Firstly, generate enough income from the farm that it pays for its own upkeep. We are not at this stage. We are reliant on income from the business, which goes directly to investment into livestock, as well as maintaining and improving the farm, which unfortunately had fallen into disrepair due to the health problems of the former owner. Secondly, sustain our groundworks business, which we established in 2018, so it can continue to provide local work for up to 20 people working on housing development sites across Lancashire. And finally, establish a modest family farming entity that can continue for years to come and be shared with our youngest son, who at 16 is working hard to develop his skills in this area. Having not owned our own livestock previously, we have had to start from scratch, requiring time and investment. The last few years have been incredibly challenging for all businesses, especially small family-run ones. As current global events have indicated, it's not going to get any easier anytime soon. Works the farm are slow and steady, as our time has first and foremost been dedicated to ensuring our staff are kept in work, which has not been easy. This is why we need to look at other areas where the farm can help to pay for its upkeep, leveraging unused space. This application provides employed work as well as a greater cost control of our own materials, as we can supply our own sites whilst providing local businesses with better rates than that of national suppliers. We appreciate the community here, and we have and will continue to consider our neighbours wherever practically possible. We have considered the impact of the application on our neighbours and believe this to be minimal due to the location selected and the proposed hours which fall within the times in which we feed our livestock currently. The operator's licence limits the number of vehicles that can be on the road at any one time, and so naturally this also limits the movements on the highway. The core function of the vehicles is to leave and collect materials from various quarries and recycling plants and to deliver to sites across Lancashire throughout the day, including local farms and businesses. From time to time, we may need to load a wagon with a small retained stock of material to complete a loaded brake test to meet legal requirements. However, we can happily restrict this limited activity to certain times. The retrospective aspect of this application is a result of a misunderstanding on our part, as we attempted to clear up the area and not a deliberate attempt to bend the rules or abuse agricultural planning rules. Thank you for listening, and I hope this provides some reassurance around our intentions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie, and thank you to all the speakers this morning. Really appreciate you taking the time to come here and put your cases. I'll hand you back now to the chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So I'm going to go back to Andrew Stell now, who will continue with his presentation. Thank you to the speakers, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, so this is the plan that I had before. So just to sort of remind you of the context, access point over here to Greenhouse Lane, access track that comes around this paddock through the farmyard area, and then this is the area to the rear of the farmyard where the vehicles are proposed to be stored. We've got building that's the first speaker referred to being converted to storage use here. These are buildings associated with the agricultural activity on the farm, and this is the farmhouse itself. Some pictures of the site. So these are from perhaps 12 months ago. So this is the agricultural building that is being converted to storage. So the farmhouse is in the distance in that direction. The neighbouring property is behind that building. This picture is taken from the corner of that building, looking the other way. So doing that. So this is the area that's where the storage is taking place. So this is the bottom end of the farm. You can see that there has been some material brought on there to form an area of hard standing, which is the area that's used for the storage of vehicles. These are later pictures, so these were taken at Christmas. So that's the building that I've just been describing, the storage building. We can now see that this 3 metre high concrete barrier has been constructed. You can just see behind these vehicles, you can see the hedge, which is the boundary to the fields occupied by the neighbouring farm, the first speaker. Obviously some vehicles stored on this area of hard standing. This second picture is taken, that's just from the corner of that barrier, so you can see the same 2 of the 3 vehicles that you can see on this picture, and that gives you the extent of the area in question, is the purpose of that picture. These pictures were taken yesterday. You could probably tell by the climatic conditions. So we've got the storage building here in the background. This area in front of this barrier is the parking area associated with the storage building, storage use. So the vehicles that you previously saw, the digger vehicles, were in this location, and then this is a slightly widened view to show how they relate to the hedgerow and how the heights of the barrier relates to the hedgerow. Had discussion about the access point. So this is 2021, top to the left-hand side. So that's showing how the access used to be. This is looking north, so the access is on the right-hand side. You can see how the road bends round, and that puts the access point on the outside of that bend. This is a more recent picture looking the other way. So this is the farmhouse at Tunstead's Farm. The Showerlands site is round the corner in this location. You can see that this access has been improved. That was a requirement of the storage permission that required a hard surface to be provided at the entrance from the site to the highway, and then there's a stoned track that, as I said earlier, extends around the paddock and leads to the farm buildings that you can't see on this picture, but are behind the farmhouse that you can see there. Final images. These are a couple of pictures that I've taken over the times of when I've visited. So you can see it's an area of this isn't actually the application site. This is alongside it while the application site was being constructed. But again, this is the type of vehicles that are present on site whenever I've been. So there's a tractor. This is a stone moving vehicle, and then you've obviously got these digger vehicles as well. So this is intended to give you an indication of the type of vehicles that we're talking about being stored within this area. You can see other typical farm type arrangements with farm buildings and bits of material that are stored around there. So just bringing having given you sort of a flavour of what it looks like and explain the scheme, looking at the sort of planning issues, starting point with any application is the local plan policy. This site is in the countryside. Filed local plan policy GD4 applies in countryside areas, and as the speaker from Greenhalgh Parish Council highlighted, that aims to preserve the rural character of those areas, which it does by sort of making a requirement to consider the nature of activity and the visual impact of it, but it does allow certain exceptions to that general restraint. And one of those is to support rural businesses. That ties in with paragraph 88 of the MPPF, which supports farm diversification, where there's limited impact on surrounding areas. And that's something that's happened elsewhere. We've heard talk of numerous caravan sites on Greenhalgh Lane. There's a dog field business next door that has been approved at committee. There's storage uses along the lane. So there is quite a bit of farm diversification that takes place on various properties and former farms on Greenhalgh Lane. Planning policy has allowed for those. In my view, planning policy would allow for this because it's not a harmful form of diversification. The reasons for that, and I've picked out on the next sort of 3 bullet points the main issues. The first one is the visual impact. This is right at the back of the site. You don't see it from Greenhalgh Lane, either from the front or as Greenhalgh Lane bends round, you don't see it across the fields. There's roadside hedges, there's intervening fields with hedge boundaries, and then there's the hedge boundary to this particular site. So whilst the 3 metre barrier is 3 metres, that is consistent with the height of the hedges, and so that means that that feature doesn't have have any form of harmful impact, notwithstanding that it looks exactly like a Sileys clamp anyway, which are clearly rural features. From a highway perspective, Greenhouse Lane is a rural lane. It's a kilometre just short from the site to Fleetwood Road. Fleetwood Road is then obviously part of the strategic highway network, leads to the M55 junction relatively close, leads to Windy Harbour and other directions going north. So Fleetwood Road clearly designed to accommodate vehicles of all sizes. Greenhouse Lane less so, but it is a rural lane that has always seen agricultural traffic, tractors, trailers, cattle wagons, milk wagons, all that kind of thing has used that road. And as a consequence, it's grown up with a series of passing places. Whilst it's not to vehicle width for the most part, there are a series of passing places that would allow vehicles to pass. The activity here, it's 3 vehicles and 2 trailers, so it's not a significant volume of traffic. We've heard from the applicant how they operate their business, leaving in the morning, doing deliveries during the day, coming back in the evening to comply with their operator's licence. The number of trips is limited. That's something that's looked at in terms of the highway comments. They've visited the site, spent time on Greenhouse Lane observing traffic activity, and they've confirmed that they don't raise any objections to it. They do suggest some conditions. Those conditions relate to the construction of the access point, which I think I've sort of highlighted in the earlier pictures is already to a suitable standard. So in the late observations paper, my response to the Highway Authority is that the conditions they've proposed are not necessary given the existing situation and the extent of the adopted highway boundaries in that location. But for rounding up on the sort of highways point, there's adequate capacity on Greenhouse Lane and the surrounding networks. The access point is appropriate, and the level of movements and passing opportunities mean that highway safety isn't an issue. Final bullet point I put there is the amenity issues. Yes, vehicles are noisy. The proposal is for them to commence activity early in the morning at 6 o'clock. And that's partly why the barrier has been erected. That allows the vehicles to be behind the barrier when from the neighbouring perspectives. So I've got an aerial image here to try and demonstrate that. So the area of the storage is generally the red area here. The nearest property is Sharrowlands Farm, so that's 140 metres away. You've got the nearest touring caravan site at 90 metres, and then you've got the holiday lodge that was discussed, that's at 100 metres. So there is some distance between the two. The barrier that I've showed on the images runs in that location and that location, wraps around, it's an L shape to wrap around there. So when the vehicles are behind there, they are starting up and doing that early morning activity contained by that physical feature. They're then going to come around the back of the farm buildings around here and then onto Greenhouse Lane, presumably left towards Fleetwood Road, where at that time of the morning, yes, there will be noise from activity passing those properties, but you're on a rural lane where there will be other potential farm vehicles using the road at that time. you're talking about a limited number of trip movements coming in, going out at that time, coming in later in the day. So as a consequence of that, my sort of assessment is that that's not significantly harmful to lead to a refusal of the application. Going back up to the final bullet points. So there are conditions suggested in the agenda papers. Those deal with obviously the area involved. They relate to making sure that the area is for the storage of the vehicles rather than being an area where large amounts of stone are stored and moved around, and diggers dropping it into the back of wagons and what have you at early morning hours. And there's also a condition about requiring details of any lighting. So with those controls in the agenda paper, the officer recommendation is to approve the application, Chairman.
Thank you, Andrew, for that presentation. Can I just check that all members have had sufficient time to look at the lake holes before we proceed? Yeah, okay, thank you. Members, it's now a chance for you to ask questions and then debate matters. So we open it up to members. We've got Councillor Evans to begin with. Thank you.
I didn't realise I'd be the first. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Vice Chair. Caught me on the hop there a little bit. There's a couple of questions, Andrew, as you'd expect. Obviously, we'd had a previous application on this site. Can you give us some information about, following on from that application, there were obviously some conditions and the surrounding residents felt there was a need for an enforcement officer to attend. Can you elaborate on why that was refused? That's the first one. Just as a point, when we showed the pictures before of an earlier outside access point, we sort of had one from one direction and one from the other direction, and I think it would be helpful for future presentations if we had the same image. So ideally a picture from, because we're comparing apples and pears there, it would be useful to have a picture from both ends so we can see what was there previously and what was there now. We've all got a good imagination, but I just think it would be helpful. It's just a point. And the third point is, I think it's useful for everybody just to underline the fact that when we're looking at a retrospective application, we are, as a committee, looking at that as if there was no development there, and we're looking at it anew. And so if it wasn't there, we have to make sure that we come to the same considered opinion, because we do spend an awful lot of time when we're looking at applications in the countryside discussing the implications of flooding and what the implications are on surrounding areas and surrounding farmland when water is dispersed into those areas does cause problems, and this application has dumped a considerable amount of hardcore into the ground without planning consent or for conditions to be put into place to deal with the flooding impacts of doing that. So that's a cause of concern to me. And does this industrial development, because it is an industrial development really, does this create significant harm to the neighbours? Obviously you're saying in the report that you think that it isn't a significant harm, but I would like that elaborating a little bit. And finally, the 20 wagons in 2 days that we heard about, is that atypical, or is that during the construction of the hard standing? Because obviously 20 wagons wouldn't be going to a farm in 2 days, and that would lead me to believe that there is a significant harm if that was going to be the norm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Do you want to respond at that point? Because there were a number of questions in there. It would be helpful.
Yeah, perhaps slightly more than the couple that Councillor Evans
right,
set
okay.
out.
A few questions then. Okay.
Yep, I'm happily to deal with all those points as best I can. Take your point about the access. The original version of access photographs, the original version of the presentation actually did do what you asked to do, and I thought I've got a lot of pictures in here. I'm gonna slim it down. So these pictures do show opposite directions, but the works that have taken place since the Street View images in 21 are essentially the bringing in a lane of a tarmac surface here. So the access is the same. It's the same location. It's the same size. These hedges are the same hedges. That road sign's that road sign that I can see there, just about. You know, it's the same. The geometry is unchanged. I think if there were, it's a good point, and I think if there were changes to the geometry of the junction, it would be helpful to show that. But hopefully this gives you a flavour that it's just the surfacing. That track has also been improved, and I was trying to get a picture into the presentation this morning to show that. But previously it was just a rough farm track, and there's been stone brought on. And that's now a fully surfaced stone track that leads, round here. So that's all surfaced to that point. Then it changes to being road planings, and then it comes into the farmyard at this location here. You're right to highlight, and I think that's a point that one of the speakers made, that just because this is a retrospective application, that doesn't make any difference to the requirements to assess it against planning policies. So it shouldn't be given any greater level of support just because the development's already, the majority of the development has been undertaken. You talked about vehicle movements. The application that we're looking at, sorry, I'm doing them in a different order, but you did talk about the number of vehicle movements recently. I'm not aware of what they, I'm not certain on what they relate to, but I am certain that this application relates to the storage of up to 3 vehicles and 2 trailers within that site. So I suspect that the vehicle movements that have been quoted this morning relate to either agricultural activity, because there is agricultural activity taking place on the site, or works to form the hard standing area in question. You can see from this image that I took at some visit last year, there's been the ground's been scraped off level. There's been a sheeting laid down. There's been stone dropped on top of that. That stone will have been brought onto the site by some vehicles. So that activity has happened, but it's not the activity that's the subject necessarily of this application moving forward, because the application is for storage of vehicles which are stored here as part of the applicant's operator's licence, are then driven to quarries or other stone collection locations, and then transport stone from those locations to construction sites throughout the region. So it's not, we're not talking about having volumes of stone stored on this site and then taken from this site to a building site in Kirkham, and then the vehicle coming back, pick up more stones, take it to another vehicle site in Wheaton. That's not what's happening here. The vehicles are parked here. They collect stone from elsewhere and then deliver it to elsewhere and then come back to this site unladen.
Can I go in there? Thank you. I think that's an important point. So, I'll remember the other ones that I'd asked, but that is an important point because that is a large, hard-standing area. Yeah. You know, that can store a lot of vehicles. Those JCBs or diggers, for want of a better phrase, you know, if they're being transported to other sites, they go on a low loader. They're not obviously driving down the road, and their primary function is to move hard standing, move stone, move piles from one place and load vehicles up. And my concern is, you know, we've heard that previous applications have have slipped a little bit in terms of what we originally expected on site. So the conditionality, should this be adopted, it is very, very important, because there's an area, there's a large area which can store an awful lot of stone there, and you know, if it is just storing the lorries to then go to site, move something to somewhere else, as you've just explained, then that's one thing. If this is going to be a large storage area for aggregate, then that is something completely different, and you know, that needs to be nailed down from my point of view. And the other 2 points were why was the request for an enforcement officer refused, and what the impact of on flooding would be. Thank you.
Just if I may, before Andrew comes back in, I think your point about storage and processing of materials, Councillor Evans, is covered under condition 2 on page 67 of the report. What I would just ask Andrew to do, in addition to addressing your points, is to address how that could be enforced if such a thing was required.
Yeah, that's exactly the answer. The area of land that's subject to this change of use application is for the storage of the vehicles only, and that condition is specifically worded to enforce that. It is a larger area, and that area is to largely permit the vehicles being able to turn. So these are big vehicles that need big areas to turn, and that's the reason for it. This picture may be misleading, because I've been 4 or 5 times to the site. This is the only time I've seen this number of diggers. This visit was Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas Eve, where this machinery is, I'm told, generally out on site, but it's come back to base during the Christmas closure. So I've put these pictures in because there were pictures I had that showed the barrier and the relationship, but I want to perhaps make that clear that this isn't a normal operating arrangement with vehicles on site to move stone around. So I want to clarify that to committee. In terms of the other questions, the flooding one, obviously the site is stoned, so the water percolates through the stone. There is a pond on site. Which way am I going? This way. So there's a pond on site here. That has, when I've been, the last time I went, there was drainage connections from this building being laid across and allowing an outfall into that pond. So there is, obviously, the site needs to operate, and a site needs to be drained to operate. So I'm sure that there is drainage that's part of the operational requirements of the applicant, irrespective of what we would say as a planning authority, to make sure that you know, a vehicle that's delivering stone around will be heavy. You don't want it sinking in your own site to not be able to do the work with it. That brings me back to your initial point, which was about an application that was previously determined by committee and the enforcement action that followed. The application that was previously determined here was actually approved. So I think you said, Councillor Evans, that it was refused. That wasn't the case. So that's the permission in place to convert this building, this former livestock building, into a storage use, commercial storage. There have been a number of requests for enforcement visits, and a number of visits have been made. Like I say, I've been 4 or 5 times. The enforcement officer's been probably the same number of times to sort of check on that. This is the building, so it's been converted. I understand it's been done by the applicants themselves in their free time, so it has taken quite a long, protracted period to do the conversion. You can see the roof's clad here, doors are on the front here. If I go to this picture, it's in a more converted state there. At my most recent visit, sort of a couple of months back, it still wasn't quite complete. So as I understand it, the storage use, the commercial storage use, where it would be rented out to people doing domestic storage or a joiner storing his wood stocks or whatever, that hasn't commenced as yet. So whilst there have been concerns over activity to the site, our visits have confirmed that they've either been associated with, the activities either been associated with the conversion of this building, the laying of the stone on the access track, or the formation of this hard standing area and the erection of the barrier and all that kind of thing, which are part of the application that we are considering today. So there's no other than this application, there is no outstanding enforcement allegations or investigations taking place at this site.
That's really helpful. Now, I mean, I wasn't saying that it was refused. That what I was trying to tease out was that because of concerns on the previous one, the chairman had directed local people to be vigilant, and so it was important that if concerns were raised, that we were then looking to check on that, because I think that it teases out the direction of travel. You know, we're hearing two stories realistically, and I think it's really helpful. So thank you for the information. Thank you.
I think you raise a very important point as well, so thank you for those questions. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, really just to say that, I mean, that's exactly what has happened, in that we received queries about what's the activity taking place. The enforcement officer visited, said, oh, you know, yeah, I can see you're converting that building. What's going on over there, though? And that's why we are where we are today. So, you know, the sequence of events has followed through.
Councillor Pittman.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the speakers who came and to give their representations. And yes, I have listened to Andrew's answers to Councillor Evans. I'm wondering, have you measured how far this hardcore area is at the moment? And my next question will be, is there anything to prevent it being extended around this area to put more vehicles or whatever they are into this particular area?
I presume, Andrew, without cutting you off here, that would require further planning permission, would it not? But anyway, I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Chairman. The planning permission, any planning permission relates to a red line. So the red line in this case includes the access track, includes a route through the farmyard, and then it includes this area here where the vehicles are stored. So if there were to be additional vehicles brought on site and they were being stored over here, they would be outside of the scope of this planning permission. So that would be a further matter for us to investigate. Obviously, it's a working farm, so there may well be tractors and trailers and the like associated with that, as there no doubt have been for many years. But if there were commercial activities taking place, then that will be something that we will be able to deal with. And then the condition that was referred to by the Vice Chairman about the number of vehicles obviously applies, and we can visit and measure, you know, count those if need be.
Thank you. I obviously, yes, once you've got this area, it might very well be that, yes, in the near distant future there'll be another application. I am very unhappy about the way in which this area, which, yes, has always been a rural area, it's been a farm area, is basically now subject to the needs of civil engineering, and it is more of an industrial car park, which to my mind, is alien to a rural economy. And I'm not sure whether this particular example of rural diversification would have been anticipated when the policy was put into place. Because as far as I'm concerned, yes, unfortunately, the needs of, yes, the caravan parks, the neighbours, etc., and their life obviously is going to change if this sort of thing is an example of rural diversification. And I feel that once you've got large areas of hardcore to basically site very large vehicles, which create an awful lot of damage on even the normal road system, is appropriate, and I really cannot support something that is going to extend this alien use of this area of greenhouse. I don't think it's appropriate diversification, and it's quite unsettling to find that yes, this is up for approval. So I, for one, would not be in favour of it, and I would, at some stage, be quite happy to propose that we do not approve this. But that's obviously for later. Thank you.
Would you like a response to some of your concerns there from the officer? Because obviously the questions raise a lot of issues, and it's really important that those are explored and responded to, because you've made some good points there, and they deserve some answers, I think. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is clearly an industrial activity. It's an industrial activity that's taking place on a farm, but it's an industrial activity there that's taking place as part of the activity on that farm. So we're looking at a corner of the farmyard here. We're looking at this building that's got consent for storage, but then we're looking at the rest of the site that is available for agricultural activities, and there is agricultural activities taking place within it. I've been sent pictures of, you know, the cattle and the sheep that are there. Now, we've heard from the speaker, the applicant, about, you know, they are using this as a way of, yes, helping their business, but also supporting the building up of the agricultural activity on the farm that had perhaps fallen into some disrepair. There are many other farm diversifications in that particular area. Even on this image, we can see there's a caravan site next door, there's a caravan site over here, there's a dog field here, there's storage taking place in these buildings here. If I go further down here, there's other storage arrangements, there's a fishing lake, there's other caravan sites. So there are a range of diversifications. And that's where policy GD4 says, yes, you can, and national planning policy says you can diversify farming activities to support the rural economy, but we need to look at the potential harms for that, which is why in the presentation I went through the visual impact behind hedges and relatively low level tucked away at the back of the farm. We looked at the highway impacts. The Highway Authority don't object, and the number of movements is relatively low. And we looked at the amenity impacts. You've got the distances there. You've got the concrete barrier to try and sort of baffle the noise in the morning, and come to a view as to whether those harms are actually so harmful that they outweigh the rural economic benefit. Now, that's a planning judgment. My judgment is that it's fine, hence the recommendation. If you come to a different view, then that's obviously your view. If you were looking to not support the application, there would need to be a reason why that was the case, though. So there need to have to be some harm identified that that was a particular issue that outweighed the benefits for supporting this business, supporting the wider activity at Tunsteads Farm, supporting the economy of the area in general. If that helps, Jane.
I've just got one question regarding some of this, because some really interesting questions have been raised by Councillor Pittman in terms of how you describe this particular application. Some people have described it as industrial activity. Is the storage of vehicles where there isn't a process or manufacturing or even delivery of materials coming onto the site, is that something that should be duly considered, that it might be industrial in nature, the vehicles and the operation that they're involved in the wider picture, but actually in terms of use of the site, it is storing vehicles?
Yeah.
Is that something that we should reflect on, just to help you?
Yeah, whether it's semantics or not, perhaps industry does imply that there is a process taking place. Perhaps commercial would be a better description of it. It's not an agricultural activity. I think that's the starting point for why it needs planning permission, is that if they were storing tractors and trailers and diggers and loaders and combines and muck spreaders and all that type of machinery that is quite legitimately and is stored on, no doubt, this site and all the other farms in the area, then that wouldn't need planning permission. But because the storage is associated with this commercial use that's taking place elsewhere, that's why we're here today.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Just a couple of questions. These trailers that would be stored, that are, it suggests there's 2 trailers. Is that a trailer carrying a vehicle or just a trailer not? Because that, if there are vehicles on top of the trailers, that's increasing the amount of vehicles in the compound.
My understanding is that relates to the operator's licence, and the trailers are associated with moving the diggers around predominantly, because obviously, as one of the speakers earlier said, if you have these digger type vehicles, which are generally on site, they need to be on a trailer to get from site A to site B, and that trailer needs to be stored somewhere when the vehicles are not are not being transported around on it. This is all wrapped up with the commercial vehicle operators licence, which places requirements on commercial operators to have a location that's appropriate for storing the vehicles that operator's licence relates to. So that if you were if this was somebody was applying for an operator's licence on a residential estate somewhere, the traffic commissioners wouldn't grant that operator's licence because they don't have place to storage. That's why it's here.
So in effect, the 2 trailers could have them on top of it, but they're classed as 2 trailers. The vehicles on top of them wouldn't count as the vehicles in the storage area. So you'd have 3. You could still have 3 big trucks, 2 trailers with 2 diggers on top of them, but the 2 diggers wouldn't constitute as being the vehicles because they're on the trailers.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So in effect,
whether the trailer's empty or full.
Yeah.
A vehicle.
The trailer just counts as a
it's
trailer.
the trailer there. Yeah. I say that reference has come from the operator's licence, and that's really the idea would be to try and, a bit like when we have licensing committee and planning committee, it's to try and tie the 2 bits of legislation together.
Okay, and then the storage area, which is not part of this, But could any of those vehicles that are on there be put into that storage area? Would that, because it's commercial storage, would those...
No, the area in question where the application relates to is the location where those 3 diggers are.
Yeah, but could those 3 diggers be moved from there into the storage area? And
They
then
are in
more-
the storage area. I don't
No,
know.
in the other storage area that's on site.
Oh, sorry, my.
Yeah.
You mean the
Yeah,
storage
no,
facility
yeah,
that's already...
Apologies, I've been a bit slow there. No, the area that has permission for storage is this building behind it. So it's a building with a series of much smaller units. You wouldn't get those vehicles
Wouldn't fit 'em
inside
in.
it.
Right, okay.
You know, it's the size of a big double garage each
Right,
unit.
that's fine. That's fine. Also, the last one, this concrete block. I get it's on a farm, but it's horrible, isn't it? Let's face it. It looks ugly. It can possibly be seen from? Is there any way of sort of putting some conditions on it that it's surrounded by planting of trees or something? So, again, they would act as bafflers for noise, because that in its own right won't stop a load of noise, would it? Contribute to stopping some. But if you've got a load of trees around it, that would help, I'm sure.
From an acoustic perspective, the concrete barrier will be a much more effective acoustic protection than any landscaping that were around it.
No, but in addition to the
But
concrete thing.
the value of planting hedges and trees and landscaping is to improve its appearance from where it can be seen. And the only off-site locations you would see it from is, if you're looking at the left-hand picture, is behind that hedge across the next field, behind the hedge that separates the next field from the field beyond that, and then the hedgerow that connects the road. So you're looking at 3 hedges away in terms of visual impact. In fact, 4 hedges, because the barrier's here. So you've got hedge, and then that road comes round, roadside hedge there.
Yeah.
So in terms of visual impacts, from the road, you've got that distance, you've got that screening. There is a right-of-way that comes up here, but it's behind the buildings here, it's behind the hedges and the trees here. There's a hedge across the bottom, so it's behind there. So in terms of landscaping value, I don't see that there is any value in landscaping on this site, particularly given the nature of the uses involved.
If I may just pick up on that point, Andrew, what would be the visual impact from the caravan site? Would that similarly be?
The caravan site is, you can see from there is a very well established 2.5, 3 metre hedge around it. So it is very contained as caravan sites go.
So there would be a serious visual impact?
Well, in terms of, I can't see that there will be any visibility between the caravan site and the storage area due to that hedge that you could see in the previous picture I showed, and then this sort of square of hedging that there is around the Sharrow site.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Gardner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm still very confused and concerned about noise with regards to this application. I think it was brought up by the speakers about the wagon movements and the noise that obviously has happened in the construction of this construction site. And given where it's situated with the caravan site, the farm, the damage to animals that was discussed by one of the speakers, obviously we've gone through that process and we're where we are now. I'm still confused and concerned about the level of noise that will take place from here, and obviously a precedent that it sets that it's happened in the first place. So I just would like real clarification from Andrew, if you don't mind, on what levels of noise we perceive happening going forward for the people in the area.
It might also be to do with environmental health in terms of what their views are about noise abatement, etc.
Yeah, it is possible to use noise measuring equipment and provide decibel details and that. I don't have that information, so I can't give you a figure. There isn't a noise assessment with this application. We have required those in other instances, and perhaps that's other instances where there is a much more intensive level of activity taking place. I think my view on this one is that because we are talking about a relatively modest number of vehicle movements in terms of, you know, up to 3 vehicles, yes, vehicles starting up can be noisy, but with that level of activity, with the distances and with the concrete barrier screening, my kind of assessment of it is that the level of harm is acceptably low. But I can't give you a technical answer to say it will be 92 decibels above background level or whatever it might be.
I suppose what you could sort of say is that obviously there's going to be a burst of noise when these vehicles are activated in the morning and moving off site, and then there will be some noise to them when they're coming back in and, you know, onto the hard standing, etc., and parking up. So I suppose what we can say is, without doubt, we don't know what that level is, but there will be a level of noise in terms of intrusive noise, certainly at those points when they go out and when they come back in. I suspect, obviously, once they're off the premises, then there won't be any noise at all, so or very little in that area. But
Should that not be a major consideration, given we've got a caravan site there and we've got ongoing? That's going to happen daily, or we should know
yes, yeah.
what that impact is before we pass.
Yeah. Well, you've raised that point, so.
Thank
you. Yeah. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to everybody talk, I understand where everybody's coming from. Would it be possible to defer this and go on a site visit? We spend our lives looking at computer screens and photographs. We never see it in real time. Would that be possible, please?
I mean, that would be, if that was the will of the committee and it was a clear view expressed by the committee, then that would be possible.
Right.
I think we need to park that for the moment and listen to the other contributions, because we've got quite a list of people who want to speak, and I want to ensure that everybody gets an opportunity to express their view before we make any decisions. Okay. Have you completed your point now, Councillor? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Still on questions, Chair. In the report, the officer says he didn't notice there's no evidence of the level being raised 2 feet. But looking at the photos, it's a vast area. So that the whole, if you can't see any evidence of it, the whole area must have been raised 2 feet. And we're talking about heavy plant going on the site. That the material that's been brought on is going to be compacted. I have concerns about water runoff if there's no drainage. There's water runoff to adjacent pasture land. But one question I want to ask is the trailers, JCB on the back or whatever it is, how are they going to get on and off site? What's going to be towing the trailers? Yeah, that's first part, yeah. That's, if you could answer that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I can only imagine that the trailers would be towed by a tractor type vehicle to take them away. I've not witnessed it myself, but obviously that's how trailers function, isn't it? They're towed by vehicles. So whether vehicles, whether it's the operator's vehicles or other vehicles are coming on to do that, I don't know.
Yeah, carrying on, Chair. I think this was originally...
Just interrupt you for a moment. We've had a number of instances where phones seem to be sort of going off, and it might be pertinent for me as chair of the committee just to remind everybody in the room to make sure that your phones are switched off, because it's quite annoying when they... I know it can happen and something you can forget that, but if you could just check, that would be great, and make sure that we don't have any other interruptions, if that's fine. Sorry, Councillor Clark, you can carry on now.
Yeah, originally I think this is was it a Type R application? And when Lancashire County Council were consulted, at that point originally they were talking about having passing places down Greenhouse Lane. Since then it's become a full application, and Lancashire County Council have revisited it, and from the report they're saying that passing places aren't required. But the swept path analysis they've done and the assessment of traffic going up and down Greenhouse Lane is the tipper trucks. There's nothing with a tractor unit and the trailer, if you've got farm machinery coming the other way. I don't think the assessment by Lancashire County Council is still adequate. I would support a move to defer this to enable a site visit and to allow Lancashire County Council to consider the worst case scenario. We don't know if a tipper truck's going to be towing a loader with a JCB on the back. We don't know, and that hasn't been assessed.
I'm noting that that's the second request for deferral of the site.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure the Type R reference, because this has always been a planning application, so there's not been any other application here that I'm aware of, and this application hasn't changed in any way. But the only change that has happened is that we've had additional information about the nature of vehicle movements and how they operate the access, and that is why this access plan has been provided. This relates to the left-hand side has the vehicle tracking for the largest vehicle that would access the site, which is a tractor towing a low-loader trailer. So that's where, at the top of the second page of the late observations, LCC refer to a 4-axle rigid HGV being the largest vehicle that's going to access the site, and the tracking being done to deal with that, to confirm that it's all accommodated within the surfaced part of the carriageway without any overrun. Sorry, it doesn't refer to a trailer, it refers to a 4-axle rigid vehicle. A trailer wouldn't be towed by a stone wagon, would it? It would be towed by a tractor vehicle.
The point is, Chair, we don't know.
Andrew, yes.
Yeah, I mean, this application was submitted last summer. It's taken some time to get to this point. The majority of that has been associated with getting information about the vehicles that are to use the site, getting that information to LCC, and getting LCC to make their comments on the application. It's not my case, I've not been personally handling it, but from discussions with the case officer, they tell me that they've been exploring this to make sure that the vehicles that are assessed by LCC are the ones that are most are the largest ones that will be visiting the site. We consult the Highway Authority because they're the Highway Authority and they're the ones who are safeguarded with looking after the highway. So they've noted the scope of the application. They've given us comments based on how they feel that the application impacts on their highway network, and they've raised no objections to the application. So that's kind of where we go with it. If it was the Environment Agency saying this isn't going to cause flooding, we would come and say, well, that's probably how we should deal with it because they're the highway, the Environment Agency. So hopefully they've given me satisfaction that they've looked at it with sufficient robustness, but obviously that's committee's view. I don't know what else we could get if we were to defer them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Just going back, Andrew, to the photograph that showed exactly where the site is at the rear of the farm buildings and the distance between, there, 140, 90, 100. Very, very quick question. It seems to be tucked right behind the farm, so it's not going to affect that farm. And the access in goes all the way around to the new entrance around the back of everything. My question is, do we know what those two farm fields to the below and to one side of the site, are they arable or are they grazing land?
This is the caravan site. That's where the holiday lodge now is.
Yep.
This field is used for grazing. This is owned by Sharrowland Farm. So where the first speaker referred to cattle grazing, that's in that field. This field, I believe, is owned by a different farm. Obviously, in this aerial image, it's had crops on it. This field, and this field are owned by Tunstead's farm. So when I've been, they've had goats and sheep on them, and I'm not 100% sure about that one.
That's fine. It's just giving me an idea of what's going on around the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodman. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. If it helps other members, I mean, my business is situated around companies that use an awful lot of heavy equipment, and I think the word trailer is probably a little bit misleading. That 99% of the time I've only ever seen those style of diggers and excavators transported on HGV low loaders, if you like. They are driven onto the back of the lorry, and then the lorry transports them. They're not, due to the weight and the size and the height of them, they're not usually on a trailer behind another vehicle, so they are on a lorry. So I would have thought the assessment from LCC were based on the fact that, as it says in their HGV movements as opposed to trailer movements. I can't say that without knowing 100%, but any time I've ever seen them either being delivered or being taken away for maintenance, they come onto my car park on the HGV, and the vehicle is then driven up ramps onto the back of the HGV vehicle. And then the last point I've got, I know I've taken up a lot of time, that we did hear from the applicant that there were occasions, and this is down to feeding into a noise issue or potential noise issue. We heard from the applicant that there were on occasion times when materials were stored on site. Can you clarify, does that mean that the loaded lorry comes onto site and stays there overnight before going somewhere else, or does that mean that there is a pile of material which is then loaded onto the lorry on site? I know we said we're not storing stuff on the site as a regular situation, because I noticed on our note on condition 3 that it says all vehicles associated with the use is only permitted between 6 and 5:30. So there's not going to be an occasion where a digger is going to be operating at 5 o'clock on a summer's morning, loading a lorry, ready to go out at 6 o'clock, because I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, the conditions designed to ensure that this doesn't become a sort of a storage place for different grades of hardcore that's then loaded onto the vehicle and, as I said earlier, moved around different sites. In discussions with the applicant, and I'm not an expert in the haulage industry by any means, but I understand that there is a requirement to have some material available to put into the vehicles to do various brake testing that you need to do from time to time, so that you know when you're setting off, you know that the laden vehicle will be able to stop at junctions safely and that kind of thing. So whilst there may be some material on site for that purpose, the condition would ensure that the site isn't used as a stone aggregate distribution depot, as you might have seen alongside railway lines and stuff, where you've got different sorts of stone piled up ready to be used in those works. The reason for that is obviously it has a different environmental impact, but it also has different levels of activity. It has different noise. You know, when you forever loading stone on and off vehicles, it can generate noise. And the idea was, going back to sort of the discussion about policy GD4, was to make sure that, yes, this is a rural area, so if we are going to diversify, we're doing so in a way that's relatively benign and respectful of its rural surroundings. And throwing large quantities of stone into the back of a metal trailer probably doesn't do that, which is where the condition was designed to deal with.
On that basis, Chairman, I'm happy with the conditions that are being put in place, and I think they're robust enough. So I'm happy to move the application.
Yeah, I think in the past, site visits on certain occasions when you actually get on site and see it firsthand is far better than any slides or plans. And yes.
Because I am sensitive to the fact that a number of people have sort of, expressed concerns about this and more information, and perhaps a site visit will satisfy that. But we just need to get a view from the committee. Councillor Garden, did you want to say something before?
Yeah, I support, in this instance, a deferral. I'm still very concerned about noise levels.
Well, let's take it to a vote so that we can establish exactly what the committee want to do, And all those in favour of a site visit, a deferral and a site visit, please indicate, please. Well, you can see a majority of people have indicated that. So that's the decision. So we can't make a decision today, but we have decided to defer it, but additionally to have a site visit to fully understand the factors involved in making a decision. So, thank you. Well, we're going to, I was about to say, we've completed our discussions on that application now. We do have another application to consider, but I'm going to put a 5-minute.
So all the dwellings are 3-bed units, and 5 of them are wheelchair adaptable to meet the standard in policy H2 of the local plan. Density just under 47 dwellings a hectare, making efficient use of land and picking up some of the more dense terraced housing in the surrounding area. So there's 2 off-street parking spaces per unit, and the existing access is retained with some modifications, repairs of the footways and the carriageway to allow the continued use of that. So these are 2 house types, A and B, for the new build dwellings. As I mentioned earlier, you've got these steep pitch roof pediments here. So although they're described as 3-storey, the second floor is contained within the roof space, within these gables, and then the actual loft space with the Velux windows. This is plot 19, which is on the southeast corner. So that's facing St David's Road North, and then this is the front elevation facing into the site, and that's the rear with a small single-storey outrigger at the back. Just to give some context as to how the scale relates to properties on Barton Road, it's approximately 0.2 metres taller to the eaves and just over half a metre taller to the ridge. So these are the dwellings on the north side of the road. You can see them in relation to the existing former co-op building as well, and the steep hipped roof of that and how it compares. So in terms of the co-op, there's 2 extensions. The first is this facing gable that's introduced on the front, breaking the eaves line, again to accommodate first floor accommodation in the roof. And then the second is this parapet roofed extension to the south side. So that's set back from the front. This is a protruding bay window. The intention of this is really to introduce some activity to this elevation to make sure that it has that dual aspect to both Healy Road and St David's Road North. So these are street scenes through the site. So this is the north side of Healy Road, the former co-op, and then St David's Road North. And I've just included some lines here. This is the south side, just to show how the heights compare to the existing dwellings. So really, although it is 3-storey, there's very limited differences in eaves and ridge heights to make sure that it fits in with what's the prevailing 2-storey character of surrounding dwellings in terms of building heights. These are some visuals to show the materials and the finishes. So we've got these protruding double height bay windows, and then on top of those these steep facing gables recessed from the bays below. So good rhythm and symmetry, good proportions to these windows. Similarly with the co-op on the side, as I mentioned, this is really to create that focal point as you enter the site, so that when you're approaching along St David's Road North, you've got a dual aspect both onto Healy Road and onto St David's Road North. So red brick finishes with grey tiled roofs to reflect the prevailing materials in the area. In terms of landscaping, so the frontage arrangement is car parking in curtilage car parking. That's split up through the use of hedges with trees at the end to try and create some relief and avoid a kind of parking dominated frontage to that street. So that's there to screen parking spaces. There's an on-site biodiversity gain area in this corner. So the development does rely on a mix of on and off-site habitat units. Some existing trees in this corner and in this area here are retained. Others need to be removed to allow for the development. And then there's these garden spaces here that are landscaped as well on the junction as you enter into the site. In terms of boundary treatment, these more prominent boundary treatments are walls as you come in to avoid timber fences at those prominent corner junctions. This is a slide in terms of amenity impacts and spacing distances. So this is one of the main issues addressed in the report, just visualised here. So in terms of spacing between windows, so first floor opposing habitable rooms, we would normally expect 21 metres. That's exceeded in all situations, both within the site and between existing dwellings surrounding it. There's, in terms of garden depth, some of those are slightly below the guidance in the SPD, so 10.5 metre garden depths would normally be expected between first floor windows and the closest garden boundary. That's really due to the layout of the site, the position of the existing road, and to maintain that access. There's a constraint there that requires the dwellings to be positioned as a limited amount of space, essentially, where you can position the dwellings on the north side of that road. So that does result in some reduced garden depths along that boundary. That is offset, in our view, by the much larger garden depths here. So properties on Barton Road have a minimum of 15 metres and a maximum of 17 metres. So there's some offsetting there in terms of the 10.5 metre standard that envisages 10.5 metre back-to-back gardens. The result of that is that any overlooking from the upper floor windows in these dwellings is limited principally to the rearmost part of the gardens on Barton Road rather than the windows or the principal garden areas and patios that exist to the rear of these properties. There's a similar relationship within the site where this garden is below 10.5 metres deep, and we would have a degree of overlooking into the garden area of this property from the windows in here. But those levels aren't considered to reach the threshold of an adverse impact. I mentioned the windows in this property at 227 here, where you had windows in the side looking into these gardens and a window at the back looking into this garden. So you can see for comparison that those are much shorter distances in terms of mutual overlooking that creates in comparison to what's proposed by the development. Permitted development rights have been removed from these dwellings on the north side of the road, with the main reason for that being those shallower garden depths. One of the other main issues is viability and infrastructure contributions. So this development would normally attract 30% affordable housing on site. That equates to 7 dwellings in this case. There's no public open space on site because the amount of open space required is below the threshold in the policy, so we'd be seeking an off-site contribution. So that's £1,000 a dwelling, which equates to 22,000. And the Integrated Care Board have requested a primary healthcare contribution of 17,000, and then there would be monitoring fees per trigger per contribution associated with these. Just to note that the school planning team have advised no education contributions required. So that's been put to the applicant, and they've prepared a viability appraisal which assesses the impact of those contributions on the development's financial viability. The latest version of that appraisal estimates a profit of approximately 11.2% on gross development value, which is the total revenue achieved by the development from the sale of the houses. And that appraisal contends that because this falls below the target of 18%, the development's unable to make any infrastructure contributions. So that viability appraisal has been scrutinised by the Council's independent consultant, that's Kepi Massey, and they've arrived at the conclusion that there are some discrepancies there with respect to the overall costs. and the benchmark land value. Those equate in total to a difference of 833,000, and on that basis Kepi Massey have advised that while the development can't make any contribution towards affordable housing, it can make financial contributions equivalent to £45,500 while still achieving the 18% profit on gross development value. The applicants accepted that position and wants to progress to committee on that basis in line with the independent appraisal. So effectively it's a choice now for members in terms of how to distribute that £45,500. The recommendation of officers is that that is distributed towards public open space in order to achieve the full contribution required by the policy, and healthcare again to achieve that full contribution. So the rationale behind this is really because that amount of money, 45,500, wouldn't be enough to fund an affordable housing unit. So our view is that it's better spent on other infrastructure where it can meet those contributions in full. There's then a residual of £6,500 after those contributions, which would be made towards the provision of affordable housing off-site, so that would go into the Section 106 fund for off-site delivery. So in terms of the main issues, the site's in an accessible location within the settlement of a key service centre. Part of it's allocated for housing in the local plan, and it has benefits in terms of bringing a long-term vacant site back into use. I'll show the site sections that show that although it's 3-storey, or there's 3 floors to the dwellings, they are compatible with the 2-storey scale of surrounding properties as a result of the height. In our view, it's a high-quality bespoke design. It picks up the features of surrounding dwellings well, those pediments, bay windows and materials, appearing as a modern interpretation of that surrounding pre-war terraced architecture. Modest extensions to the co-op and the retention of that building provide a focal point on the junction and allow it to be converted. I mentioned the spacing distances. Really, when we're looking at this, we're looking at what is typical in the area, what's the general density and character of surrounding development. So we've got a mix of house types in the area, including terrace, semi-detached properties, some of which are quite tightly packed, quite densely packed. So the separation distances aren't uncharacteristic of what's typical in the area. So in terms of highway impacts, it reuses the existing access and the current road layout, some minor modifications around the access and to repair those footways to close off that secondary access to allow it to be used for residential traffic. Low number of traffic movements, so 13 and 11 two-way vehicle movements in the AM and PM peaks. That's less than 1 added trip every 4 minutes to the highway network, and 2 in-curtilage parking spaces for each 3-bed dwelling complies with the SPD parking standard, and there's no objections from the Highway Authority. Infrastructure contributions are reduced due to viability. That's something that's allowed in the local plan and the framework, and has been independently verified by Kepi Massey. So I mentioned there's now a choice to be made in terms of where those contributions are spent. The site is in flood zone 1, so it's not at risk from any fluvial sources, but there is risk arising from surface water flooding. So the sequential test has been carried out to show that there's no reasonably available alternative sites that don't have the same level of surface water flood risk within the search area. There's no objections from the lead local flood authorities, and a drainage strategy has been submitted as part of the scheme to show that surface water can be dealt with without increasing flood risk elsewhere or putting the future occupiers at risk of flooding. There's no other harmful effects in terms of on-site ecological impacts, and matters relating to contamination can be dealt with through condition. There's also no objections from Network Rail, although there is a separate requirement for the applicant to engage with them when constructing the development, and there's no objections from Blackpool Airport in terms of aerodrome safeguarding. Just to mention biodiversity net gain, that there is a dual approach to that, so there will be some on-site habitats provided, but even with those, there's a loss of approximately 55% from biodiversity net gain, which will need to be offset through the purchase of units from third party away from the site. So the application is recommended for approval on that basis in accordance with the resolution in the agenda.
Thank you, Matthew, for that presentation. As I say, there are no speakers, so we'll go straight into questions, please. Councillor Evans, to begin with.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to support this application. I think we've got to be careful that we don't let the pursuit of perfection get in the way of progress, and this site has been derelict for many years. Several developers have had a look at it and have not brought anything to fruition. I think it looks good. I think it matches the Porritt style of properties in the area, like you said, with a new twist, and I think it's sympathetic to the surrounding area. I think we've got to weigh the benefits of, we don't meet the affordable housing level, but we do meet, or we do get some accessibility properties which are much needed in the area, so I think that's a good thing. I think it does bring more property into the housing stock, which we're also short of, so I think that's a good thing, and from my way of looking at it, the benefits outweigh the negatives on it, and we are getting 45,000 there or thereabouts towards projects, so on the balance I think it's well worth supporting, and I'm happy to recommend it. Thank you.
Okay,
moving. Before we do it, if I may, I think Councillor Evans must have been earwigging on the discussion that was held at Sandhurst Town Council about this, because we covered virtually the same points Town Council made, and Town Council, for the record, I was part of that discussion. Town Council did support the application, and the point was made that it is very much in character, and that Porritt-esque, although not Porritt houses, and you know that they fit in with the design styles round about.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Settle.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with those comments. I have to compliment the architect on the design of these. They really are high quality. As Councillor Evans has said, they're very, very much in the Porritt style, albeit modern houses. And I have no reservations at all, and happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Goodman.
Thank you. I have no questions, but I have very fond memories of Fairways. My mother drove the little van that took the car parts everywhere from Fairways in the late 60s. And it's also, that area is in my ward, well and truly in my ward. And it's one of the questions that comes up quite regularly. What are you going to do about that wasteland? I think everything that both Councillor Evans and Councillor Settle have said, it's a really attractive look for that site, and I'm very much in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodman. Councillor Dixon.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say thank you very much for a really detailed chat through, Matthew, and the same for Andrew actually in the one before. I think both presentations today have been really good from the officers, really detailed and left me with no questions really. No, I think the design for this is fantastic. How lovely to see new house designs and not the same old. I think it's fantastic. It's only a couple of years ago that my daughter went down there for a photography A-level and took pictures which went into a post-apocalyptic wasteland display. So this is really good to see this coming forward, and I've got no hesitation in supporting it unless someone persuades me otherwise in the next few minutes. Thanks, Chair.
Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. This is probably just more of an educational question. I really support this, like the rest of the committee. It's been there for a long time and we all get questions about it. And I think the architect and the builder's plans are excellent for the site. But I have one question, and that's regarding 106 support monies, and the money's going to Poplar House, and I just wondered how that decision comes about, that it's Poplar House that gets that money, if we know the answer to that question, as opposed to other GP surgeries in the area, although I know there are many.
In terms of where the contributions to be spent, essentially the ICB will choose the closest GP practice, and that is how they will allocate that money. So they have a formula that links it to the population of the development, and then that equates to a financial contribution.
Yeah, sorry to just come back, but there is another GP surgery as Poplar House, so I just wondered whether anybody could answer me that question, just for education purposes.
You're talking about Durham.
I'd have to get inside the ICP's mind and understand that, but really it is a case of they choose the closest one. In this case, there's two that are equally close, and they've picked one over the other. I'm afraid I just can't tell you why they've done that.
I presume there's going to be a protocol, isn't there, in terms of how they actually make these decisions, so they'll have done it on some legitimate basis. So I personally, I don't have too many concerns about it. Is it half a mile, 0.6 a mile, something like that,
I think
away?
Within that, Chair, I believe that Poplar House is the lead. They're responsible for the infrastructure there, so I presume so we won't do it again.
It's just an interesting.
I tell you what, we can find out a little bit more.
If you can find out, I'd be very interested
I don't think it's
to know.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
I just want to add a few comments regarding this particular application, because every time for the last, since 2009, something like that, been fairly derelict. And the scheme that's been put before us this morning, I think, is excellent. I think it's excellent in terms of layout, efficiency of use of land, in terms of design, in terms of using red brick and materials that are very much commensurate with the local character of the area. There is a need for 3-bedroom homes rather than 4 and 5 bedrooms, so they're clearly family homes. And the street scene will be completely positively transformed by this development, and I would imagine, you know, anybody who lives in that area will see this as an enhancement of their local environment and their housing area, rather than any particular threat or concern about it. So you know, I think I must ask, are there any other contributions that anybody wants to make? And have we got a proposer, Councillor Evans, and we've got a seconder in terms of Councillor Gardner. So unless there are any other comments, we're going to move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate. That is unanimous. And thank you very much, members, for this morning and for your deliberations. Thank you. Thank you to officers as well for their presence, and for the remaining members in the public gallery, for which we've 2. So there we go.
Chairman, if I could we not just give our thanks?
Thank you for reminding me. I should say that this is it the last day?
Not technically.
No, but it's the last day physically, because you've got leave, haven't you, that you need to use up. Head of Planning, Paul McKim, this is physically his last day, I think, in the Town Hall. So can we thank him, you know, for his services over the last year to Fylde Council, in terms of his planning knowledge, and in particular with the challenge that we have with the wind farms. It's been invaluable. So we thank you for your contribution, and we wish you all the best for whatever you pursue in the future. And I'm sure you're looking for a better Welsh team in the rugby team, which is coming as well. So there we are. There we are. Can we give him a little clap? Thank you very much. Thank you. Could I also say that I took advantage of a meeting the other day where I was able to give a little gift which I bought on behalf of you, because time was short and things were moving on. And it's actually a book regarding a particular Welsh rugby player for which he was very grateful. So there we are. So, you know, we've done that as well.
Who was it, by the way? I never...
Come on, are you going to tell them all?
It's Dan Bigger.
That's right. Yes, and most people will go, who?
Yeah, no,
I know, if you're not a rugby fan. He was the most capped number 10, which is fly half, ever, who's played for Wales. So he was the most capped Welsh player, even more than people like Barry John, who...
Oh, Barry John was legendary.
Well, Councillor Settle, I wouldn't expect you to know him, actually, but any sporting context.